Hi, hey everyone. Thanks for showing up today. Really awesome that you're all here together. Also, thank you a lot for Maxon for letting me speak today in front of you all. We are gonna talk about character creation for games today. Um, but before that, just a quick introduction from my side. My name is Jonni. I am a character artist currently working at Cloud Imperium Games in Frankfurt, Germany. At CIG, we are currently working on our two main titles that are Star Citizen and Squadron 42. And the latter one is the game that I am currently involved in. And yeah, I can only say that it's a lot of fun working at CIG. We have some amazing people. The project is really awesome. And we can't wait to show everyone what we have been up to so far. So yeah, stay tuned for more of that. Anyway, back to the presentation. And the way it's gonna be structured is I have thought about like a couple of topics that I wanna tackle on today. And the way how it's gonna work is that we are gonna take a look at some of my older work files, and I will discuss each of those topics based on what I have done for one of my personal projects in the past. So the things that I want to talk about with you today are how to create blockout meshes, how to clean up your shit. Should I be swearing? No, right? Okay. How to clean up your stuff, how how you work on faces and apply skin details, and also we are going to talk about garment creation and hard surface stuff. So, and you can see that the list here is actually quite long, and I will not be really able to get into any of those things in detail. But the main point about this presentation is not really to give you like a step-by-step tutorial on how to do these kind of things. It's more about explaining the general pipeline, and so that you have like a general idea about how to go for your own projects in the future. And if any of those things like pique your interest, you are also, of course, welcome to just ask further questions after the talk or do your own research online later on. And yeah, I just hope that at the end of the presentation, you have a better understanding of everything. So let's get started. Blockout. So what is a blockout? And do I really need one? And I will go and jump ahead and answer the second question first. Yes, you do want to create a blockout. And the reason why is, let me just explain. Can we jump into? Yeah. Okay, cool. So what is a blockout? So basically, when we go here into the samurai character that I've created in the past, this is, sorry for that. This is an early stage of the character that I've been working on. And a blockout, as you can see here, is basically just like a 3D sketch. The qualities of a blockout is simply for you to have something representable for each and everything that your character will have. So in my case here, like stuff like the armor here that you can see for the chest, the shoulders, the arms, the kimono here, the pants, the thigh guards, everything just needs to be placed somewhere. So each of those things have their own like space that they occupy, and they also need to interact a little bit with each other. And this is basically the stage where we go into our mesh and just put everything in there. So like a good blockout is complete in terms of like everything is there that you later are gonna polish, like more or less. And also it is defined as in like it's clear what it has to be, like what it is representing. And if you are, for example, working off a concept, the way how you can judge the quality of your blockout is simply by zooming out like this, for example. And let me just jump into a more advanced stage of the character. So we compare these two models from like afar in this case, and we can see they are not really that different from each other. Like all the main shapes are there, all the proportions are defined. So the thing that separates them is just when we zoom in, you can see, okay, I should go to high subdivision, sorry. You can see all the like juicy details that we have placed on all these different kind of parts. And yeah, that is just you polishing up things later on. But at the beginning, the important part is that you define everything where it needs to be, more or less. Like you can always, of course, change stuff, but you should have an understanding of what it is that you are currently working on. And how do we work on a blockout? It's essentially just using our very basic tools that are, I'm not quite sure if people here are actually familiar with the software at all, so I will just give like a brief overview for some of the brushes here. So we have, for example, the clay build-up brush that is just good for building up shapes like this. You can go across the surface here and build up things. You have things like the move brush that you can use to move things around, as the name suggests. And you have the trim dynamic brush, which flattens out the surface. Yeah, let's delete this. And so this is actually quite a straightforward stage. You just go in, use all these simple brushes to create the shapes and get into proportions that you need. And just like tip is if you are working on like bigger changes, I would assume that you I would recommend that you zoom out for this. Like if you work on big stuff, you zoom out, and if you work on smaller, more detailed stuff, you zoom in. So this way you always have like the important thing in focus whenever you're working. Yeah, you can go across here, build up a little bit more. You can spend a little time and smoothing out the surface here by using the smooth brush by pressing here Shift. And sometimes when you go online and you like watch tutorials, people are actually telling you to like not use the smooth brush because it kills your shapes. And I do know a couple of artists that even recommend to never use the smooth brush, which is kind of like a little bit too extreme for my taste as well, since the smooth brush is simply put just a tool for you to use. And it's just something that ZBrush offers you. So as long as you know what your tool does and use it mindfully, there's no problem using the smooth brush here and there. Like you can see that it's just super quick and easy to smooth the surface out. You just have to pay attention that you don't go across too much stuff here, where you just really kill whatever you have built up in 3D. So you want to have like defined 3-dimensional shapes that are not like super blending into each other, where you kind of lose focus of what it is that is actually making up the shape. So yeah, that's more or less what you should. Oh yeah, like one last thing that I would like to tackle here is the Dynamesh feature, actually, that you can turn on here. But actually, this is a custom menu, so where you actually activate Dynamesh is by going here into Dynamesh. You have this big button that you create that you can push, and here you can set up the resolution to get like how dense the mesh should be. And we can take a look here just to make it clear what it does. So let's say we make a bigger change here for the shoulder. Like, of course, this looks awful, but let's just assume that this is what you want. You can already see here by turning on the wireframe mode that the mesh here is actually quite distorted, and the resolution here, like the size of the faces, is not the same as here. So the problem that we are gonna encounter now is when we go in and use, for example, the dam standard brush to create a line here, for example, then if we try to do the same here, you can see how distorted everything gets. And that's because of the resolution that is not even on the surface. So the way how you fix this kind of problem when you are running out of resolution on your mesh is by activating Dynamesh. And in this case, it is already activated. So you let us recalculate the surface by clicking Control outside of the mesh and draw a rectangle. And then Dynamesh is going to go in, and it has recalculated the topology of the mesh. And everything is nice and even again. So we can do this, and it looks the same from a distance, like the quality at least. Still looking awful. So, all right, this is already basically what I wanted to cover for this part. We can go to the next one then. Cleaning up your meshes. So cleaning up your stuff is really just you spending a lot of time like polishing your meshes. Like there's not really a lot of like complicated technical things that we can talk about here. Let me just show you really quickly with a copy of the head that I had before. So when we zoom in, you can already directly see what it is that needs to be polished, right? You can see like all this kind of faceting going on here. You can see this very mushy line here, and all the like still remains of like brush strokes and whatever. And all this kind of stuff that is something that you want to get rid of later on. And one way of getting rid of all this is, for example, by just having a higher resolution for your mesh. So you can, for example, try to just subdivide this by going Command or Control D, and you have like 2 subdivisions now. And you can see that it is already kind of looking smoother, but it is also giving us kind of like these little bumps that you can see here and there that you can get rid of with the smooth brush. The bumps are being created because, okay, I have to, because Dynamesh is giving us like a bunch of triangles here, and when we subdivide it, we get a bunch of poles that are going to create these little bumps here. So we can get rid of them, for example, by just smoothing out the surface a little bit here and there, and it sort of works. But a better way of to approach this kind of problem is to actually go back a step. Where did I have Dynamesh subdivision? Yeah, just here. And actually create a clean base for this mesh. So I will just go in and duplicate it here in my scene. And the way how we get like a nice quick and clean version of this is by using a function called ZBrush. That is here in the geometry tab. You go into ZBrush, and what it does is like kind of similar to what Dynamesh does. It recalculates the topology of your mesh, but ZBrush is way better at keeping the topology actually clean. And so the only settings that I'm going to adjust here is actually the adaptive size, since that one indicates how uniformly sized the quads are going to be. And with this turned on, I just set the target poly count to 5K, which is fine, and we hit the button. So now, as you can see, we have a somewhat nicer topology to work on. And yeah, nice, cool. Oh yeah, I was hoping actually that this would happen here. So you can see this mess going on around here, right? And the reason why this is caused is, let me just go back one step. The reason why it's caused is because of this jaggy line that we have here. And ZBrush is trying to account for the jaggy line here and tries to incorporate it into the new mesh. And because of the high resolution, it doesn't really know what to do, so it freaks out and gives us something very messy. So the way of how to get a cleaner result out of ZBrush is by just getting rid of this jagged line here. One way to do it would be, for example, to just go into the deformation tab. We have these polish settings that we can just use by dragging the sliders. We'll just use the polish by groups one, put it to 100. There you see nice sharp line. So now we go back to ZBrush, activate it, let it do its calculation, and nice and clean, like sort of. Still not really usable for like real production in game, but it is definitely enough for us to just go in now and subdivide it properly. Have like this version of it, and you can see that all the details that we had on our blockout before are kind of gone because we are working from a lower resolution that we are subdividing. So the way how to get our details back is by simply having a copy beforehand, before we did the ZBrush part. This is the old version. This is the new version. And let me just make it visible here. We are gonna project all the details from our blockout to our new, quote unquote, clean mesh. So now you can see what we have is barely usable for further improvements. And now we don't have, when we subdivide it more, we don't have a lot of problems with bumpy surfaces. We can just do something like this. We can also use some more smooth operations if you wanted to, like set under deformation. You can do this one, for example, and we can also just work and work a little bit more on defining stuff by using the smooth brush here and there. Using the dam standard, we can now go into this place here and make it kind of like sharper. Like just, I mean, you all know how things would look like cleaner. So that's just the whole idea, right? You spend time on your mesh and make it look as believable as you can, basically. And this is also the stage, like during the cleanup, where you guys can pull up some references for the stuff that you are going to work on. And I can just maybe go into the blockout again. So, or actually, this one is actually better. So I had, for example, a bunch of references here for the samurai armor. These are actually photos taken by me on a trip to Japan. We went to this like a samurai museum, and I was that dude who got really uncomfortably close to those armor pieces in order to get some pictures out of them. And yeah, it felt awkward to be so close to those to these armor sets, but I thought back then, yeah, maybe I will use these kind of pictures later on for some of the projects that I might be working on. And yeah, it turned out it actually was useful. Was it worth the awkwardness? Sorta. But yeah. So I just want to, with this, tell you that whatever it is that you actually like do in life, just be like mindful of whatever it is that you see, and maybe just take some references or just keep stuff in mind that you find looks interesting, because it might become handy later on at some point. And yeah, as I mentioned before, the goal of the whole stage of the cleanup process is to get your stuff look as believable as possible. That means that for this stage, you want to make sure that what you have would like conveys what it is instantly to the viewer, even without any kind of material applied on top of it. You would understand that this is a hard surface piece. It is made out of at least something like plastic or maybe metal. And this is the kind of feeling that you want to achieve with your cleaned up mesh. It just has to feel right. All right. Yeah, that feels about right. Let's go with the next one. So, faces and skin details. Ooh, this is a juicy one. So, up until now, what we have been talking about was mainly stuff that is like fairly straightforward. We have been talking about using the basic tools in ZBrush, like the brushes that you can use to deform the topology, building up shapes, using simple operations such as Dynamesh and ZRemesher. And when it comes to now heads, faces, and skin details, we are going to add a little bit of a more technical component to the mix, because the way how it's being done these days with faces is that, especially like bigger productions, we are moving away from like this approach of sculpting everything by hand in ZBrush. And it is now more being done by relying on 3D scan data. And to just elaborate what this means, I will. We are gonna visit the webpage of 3D Scan Store. I don't know if this is like some kind of advertisement that I'm doing for them, but I just have to demonstrate to you what it is. So 3D Scan Store is a website that offers 3D scans, as the name suggests. So we are going to take a look at the head scan section here. And we are greeted by this army of soulless people staring at us. And so these are scans being done by 3D Scan Store, and they offer us a couple of things here. So one thing that they give you if you purchase this is the mesh that everything was built on. It is properly UV'd. It has a decent or like good topology actually for deformations and everything. It is nicely looped. But what's more important here is actually the maps that are included. Yeah, this can look a little bit funky. So let me just put this one a little bit away. So yeah, a couple of maps included here. Damn it. So a couple of maps. Sorry. Thank you. So a couple of maps here that are the displacement map, the normal map, I believe this is the roughness map, and the specular map. For the purpose of this demonstration, though, we are only going to take a look at the displacement map because this is the more relevant one here. And bless you. And as you can see, this displacement map, for anyone who doesn't know what a displacement map does, it is a grayscale map, meaning that it only contains values from like white to black and everything in between. And we can take this map and apply it on our high poly mesh in ZBrush. So based on the UV coordinates of our mesh, it will take the pixel information of the texture and decide what it's gonna do with the vertices. Oh my god, the sentence is so long. With the vertices position. So you have to imagine that each value of the pixels here represent like a numerical value. And usually how it's being done in ZBrush is that like 50% gray is meaning zero displacement. It does not move the vertex along at all. And anything that is darker or brighter is gonna affect the position of the vertex. So let me just demonstrate. We go back into ZBrush. Now, this version here. Let me just turn this layer off for 1 second. Actually, I think I'm still plugged in. Yeah, should be fine. Okay, so we are gonna apply the displacement map. Oh, wait, sorry. One step that has to come in between is just something that I need to show you guys. That is that we need the mesh that was provided by 3D Scan Store, and we have to wrap it around our high poly mesh in order to access the displacement maps, since we need the UV map that is being used here. And the way to do this is by using a software, for example, that is called Wrap3D, another advertisement that I'm doing here. We can just take a quick look at what this does. So here's a high poly model in the scene. They're plugging in a low poly model on top. They are doing some node connection and hitting the magic button to make the low poly wrap around the high poly in order to get a clean version of the low poly that goes along with what you have in terms of the shapes of your head that you have sculpted. And this is exactly what I did for the cleaned up version of the samurai head here. So I will turn on wireframe and go to the lower subdivisions. And you can see here, if you take a closer look, it is exactly the same topology as the mesh that I just showed you before on the 3D scan web page. And with this, we are now able to access the displacement map setting here. We can actually, let me create a new layer to save it on this one. We can turn this on and we get something like this. This is of course like way too intense, but that's why I put it on a layer, since now what I can do is just dial in the value a little bit to just define how strong the details are going to show. And you can see just in seconds, basically for free, like quote unquote for free, because you actually paid for it, you get all these details here without any kind of like bigger time investment. Imagine you have to go into your high poly mesh and sculpt all this detail by hand. Like, it's gonna take a long time, and I'm not even sure if the result later on is gonna look as realistic as if you would go by this approach. So this is a reason why studios are more relying on scan data these days. But it doesn't mean that we are just plugging in the displacement map and call it a day. We can still go in, for example, let me just create a new layer, and we can trace, for example, the details that the map gave us and enhance stuff a little bit here and there. Just like this, push things out. Like, of course, this is looking messy, and you get the idea. I'm just saying that you still have to do some manual elbow grease into this, but it is way less intense and way less huge amount of work that you have to do. I think, for example, I added these lip details by hand and by using the damn standard brush, for example, to get a little bit more going on here. And yeah, this is basically how heads are being done in a AAA environment, more or less. So the next thing that we are gonna talk about, garment creation. Okay, and the question is, do I need to know Marvelous Designer? For anyone who doesn't know what Marvelous Designer is, it is a software, like it is a cloth simulation software that yet lets you create realistic looking garments. And the way how it's being done, like, I wish I had like something more appealing, like a GIF or anything, but the way how it's being done is you open up the software here, Marvelous, you load in your base mesh, the body, in the 3D window here, and then you jump into the 2D window here and start creating these garment patterns. And these patterns are like the blueprint of how any type of garment is actually constructed. Like, if you take your shirt and you cut it into the pieces along the seam lines, you will get stuff that looks kind of like this. So this is the what you are gonna be working on mainly in Marvelous Designer. You are gonna create pattern shapes. You're gonna stitch them together, and you are going to simulate them on top of the body of your mesh in order to create these kind of like garments. And just to show you like how heavily it is being used these days, like basically everything that is garment on this character has been made in Marvelous Designer. The reason why I and also like a lot of people in bigger studios are relying so heavily on Marvelous Designer is that it gives you very decent results and very realistic results, because everything is like based on real physical simulations and properties that you can set up here and there to get different materials going on. And also it is a very intuitive software actually. Like what I just showed you about, what I just talked about the work process. It is really just that. You load in your avatar, you create the patterns, and you simulate them on top of it. Still have to do some manual cleanup later on with the mesh, but in terms of just getting the main shapes going in, it is just that. It is that easy actually. And it's so nice to also just like create, for example, a library that you can share among your other artists, because you can just go in and create some basic patterns for like shirts, jackets, pants, whatever, and you just give the file to the next person who's working on a different character, and you can just adjust the fitting to it. So there's not a need for everyone to just work from scratch every time when they are going to tackle on a piece of fabric like this, you know? And yeah, so, but does this mean that we don't need to create garments in ZBrush at all anymore? And the way how I'm saying the sentence might convey to you already the answer. It is no, it is still important for us to be able to create stuff in ZBrush by hand as well. And let me just show you why that is. So I go in here. And you can see this piece here, the kimono part. This is the only piece that I actually sculpted by hand. And the reason for that is that Marvelous Designer is really easy to use and intuitive and gives you nice results until it doesn't. And it doesn't give you nice results as soon as you make the garments interact with a lot of different stuff. Like a lot of things that the simulation has to take into account when creating the folds. And for the kimono, this was the case here. So as you can see, what I needed from the fabric to behave here would be to interact with the underlaying body. It would need to interact with the overlaying armored chest piece. It would need to interact with the sleeves here and the shoulder armor, and also with the neck armor here. And also with the straps that are going across the whole chest again. So there's actually quite a lot of stuff going on. And this makes it super tedious actually to try to go and solve this in Marvelous. Like I'm not saying that it can't be done. Like I've seen people creating crazy shit in Marvelous. Sorry. And but it's just like you having to decide if it's worth your time. And because as you can see, the only part that is like actually important to me is the area around the armpits here, right? So it's actually not a lot that is showing through. When we zoom out, you can see, since it's highlighted, not a lot that is being seen of the kimono at all. And this is why I decided, yeah, I would just go in and sculpt it by hand. It's not really worth the effort to making it work in a simulation. And the way how you can like sculpt folds is not that different from what we talked about so far. It is really just the same kind of process, again, with like building up shapes, cleaning up little bits of the details here and there, and make it appear like it's fabric, you know, the kind of fabric that you want to have. The only thing that is actually like making up the quality of your sculptures is that you have to know what kind of folds are being created in what kind of areas. So as you can see here, for the shoulder, you can see it on my sweatshirt here. Like the way how the folds are going downwards is different from the compression folds that I'm getting here, right? And this is the only thing that you actually have to learn or take references from, that there are different kind of folds being generated under different kind of circumstances on different kind of parts of the body. And usually you get like these kind of compression folds wherever there's like bending going on, like here. Usually it would look a little bit like this, right? You get something in that kind of direction. Usually it is these kind of diamond shapes over and over and over again, repeated. Yeah, already like when we zoom out, you can already vaguely assume, yeah, this is kind of like fabric. And the same way goes for the shoulder. You just need to, as I said, know what kind of folds you have to sculpt in what kind of areas. That's the only thing that is actually important here. And anything more on that part from my side? No, I think that's about it. Cool. Then we can go on to the next part, that is hard surface creation. Too late. Yeah, we can already go back into the scene. So about hard surface stuff, there's not really a lot that I still have to say here, since we already talked about how you clean up your meshes and how to get like clean surfaces. You use the smooth brush, you create like proper topology, for example, and you get smooth looking meshes. The thing that I want to talk about here is actually that in terms of hard surface, there are actually a lot of different ways of how you can achieve what you are after. And for this demonstration, I have prepared like the same kind of mesh. Let's assume that this is like part of any kind of hard surface piece that you're working on. And it's the same mesh being done in 3 different ways. Like if we take a look at the topology here and just go around, you can see that they are different in the way how they are being done. And for example, the first one is like, let's say, more of a traditional polymodeling way of doing. So actually like just clean topology modeled by hand. We create these indentations by actually having them in here in this like circular shape, and we extrude them downwards to create the detail here. So the second one is basically like a Dynamesh, where you get the details, the indentations, by going in with the mask pen brush, for example. Just mask that area. You invert the selection, use the move tool, and you just basically go in. And this is how you can create details as well. And the last one is an interesting one because it is essentially the same as the first one, but with the difference that the details of the indentation is actually not part of the mesh itself. It is being added on top of the mesh as this kind of floating geometry. And why it's gonna work is because we are gonna bake down our high poly mesh later on our low poly. And I have done this beforehand to demonstrate it to you. I have created a low poly, I unwrapped the pieces, and I baked our high poly information on top of it. And this is Substance Painter, where you can see the result. And you can see, even though we have different approaches, the result in the end on the low poly looks exactly the same. This is the mesh that is going into the game later on, not the high poly. And I want to really stress this part because people sometimes get a little bit too hung up on like how you create your high poly, even though it does not really make a lot of sense in like how you get anything done during the high poly stage, because nothing that you create here in ZBrush is actually gonna get into the game, you know? We are gonna take what we have here, for example this, we are applying the subdivisions, so it's like nice and smooth. And what we then do when we export it is decimating everything by going into decimation masters. We pre-process current. And decide of a value, like a resolution scale, decimate current. And you can see this is what we get in the end. Like it's a super reduced version of what we just had. Like if we go one step back, you can see it went down from 1 million points to 10% of it, which is like around 100K. And this is the mesh that you are going to use later on to bake the details onto your normal map that is being used in the game later on. So this is the reason why it doesn't matter what you do during the high poly stage. And I think this is important for people to know when they approach hard surface, since a lot of times people are just like too stressing out about how they have to like stick to a certain kind of way of doing things, even though there are many different ways of approaching whatever you are after. And yeah, the only thing that I would recommend you is that you use the workflow that you feel that feels most natural to you and gives you the best result. And if you go by that approach, I think you will always achieve decent to like good results with it, and it will feel natural to you. Okay, so that's already more or less it about hard surface. Can we go back to the slides? Thanks. So the last thing that I want to include here in the presentation is just a bunch of portfolio tips for anyone who is like currently looking for getting a job in the industry. And we are just gonna cover them really quickly because they are not like super special. Number 1 and 2 are basically the same, quality over quantity. I think you all understand what this means. Recruiters don't have a lot of time when they are looking at your portfolio. They get sent hundreds of portfolios a day, and you wanted to make it as easy as possible for you guys, for them to actually spot your best pieces. Don't make them look for it. So yeah, only show what you think is actually representing your skills the best way. Number 3, present your knowledge of fundamentals. And that is actually, how do I say this? So each discipline, whether it be like creating faces or garments or hard surface stuff, they all have their own like fundamentals that you need to identify and focus on. Like, it doesn't matter if what you are working on is like super complex looking and like flashy in a sense. If nothing is being done like to a acceptable, or actually can stick with the present. Yeah, sorry. If nothing is being done on a like high quality level, you know. And so you just have to know where you put your focus on and present to recruiters that you know how to build up anatomy, that you know how anatomy works, that you know how to operate Marvelous Designer, how to clean up your meshes and create believable characters. Number 4, make yourself relevant. This is going a little bit into like the kind of content that you are creating for your portfolio when you are applying for studios. The way how to think about it is simply studios are going to hire you so you can do a job for them, right? They want to finish the game that they are working on, and they want to make sure that you are up for the task. So if the studio that you want to work at is creating a fantasy medieval game, then you should have at least one example of a fantasy medieval character, right? In the same way, this goes for any kind of other genre or style. And this is the way how you can make yourself more relevant for recruiters because they can instantly see, okay, fuck, sorry. This guy can, or this person can actually help us finishing the project that we are working on. So number 5, the last one is more of a mindset one, that, yeah, you should always be critical with your own work. And that just means that we are spending so much time with the characters, sometimes that we create, like sometimes weeks, months, and we lose the ability to just objectively quantify the quality of our work sometimes, you know. And you just have to be honest with where you are at a quality level. So the easiest way of doing so is by just having like a benchmark comparison, like a reference. For example, you found this piece on ArtStation, you know this artist that you admire so much, and you want to reach for that quality, then you just have to pick the reference, put it next to what you have created, and just be honest with yourself and be like, is this up on a same or similar level of what I want to have? And if the answer is no, then spot the differences and work on that. This is the most effective way of how we can improve as artists on our skill, by just being honest with ourselves and being critical with ourselves. And I think, yeah, that's it. So thank you. So these are my contacts. If you guys want to like check me out on ArtStation,